Hi guys, so unfortunately it's my last day here in the Algarve. I'm flying back to London. It's been incredibly beautiful. The weather has been very much like summer, even though back in London it's starting to turn into autumn and winter. And I'm here in Faro, which is basically the sort of capital city of the Algarve and where I'm flying back from. So I'm here at a little restaurant on the beachfront. I'm going to drink my last sumol, which is like Portuguese orange juice. Which is really nice. And I've ordered some fish as well, so when that plate arrives, I'll show you that as well. Got the sort of traditional Portuguese starter, some bread, some sort of tuna, some carrots, and we've got the olives here. So this is quite a traditional way of starting your meal. And then when the main plate arrives, I'll show you that. And then afterwards, I'm planning on going out onto the beach and painting in the beautiful sunshine. Hey guys, so I'm here on Praia do Faro. I'm basically going to try and do a quick painting of the beach before I have to catch the flight. And beautiful sunny day, the sea's got a beautiful colour to it. It's not quite as interesting as some of those other beaches that I was at in sort of Armação do Pera, Porches, sort of around that area of the Algarve. But I can't complain, beautiful sunny day like this. So I'm going to paint. Remember, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel and let's go. Today I'm painting on oil primed Belgian linen and I've taped it to a plywood board. And this surface is great for oil painting as it has just enough texture to grab the paint, but it also isn't too absorbent, so your brushwork will stand out on the canvas. I toned the linen with a thin wash of raw umber, creating a warm yellow-brown ground to work over, and this takes away the glare of the white surface and helps unify the tones that go on top. Using thinned down raw umber paint, I'm sketching in the composition just with a few lines, the horizon, the angle of the shoreline, and I've placed the horizon line roughly 1/3 from the top of the painting, and this gives plenty of room for the sea and the foreground sand. As I start to apply the paint mixes to the canvas, I start with the things that are furthest away from me and I'll gradually work forward to things closer to me in the foreground. So I start with the sky, and near the horizon the colour is warmer and lighter, so I use a mix of titanium white, cobalt blue, yellow ochre and a small touch of alizarin crimson. And higher up the blue deepens and cools, so I use titanium white, ultramarine blue and cobalt blue. And I mix the transitional mix between these two colour mixes on my palette and then apply this between the two colour mixes for the sky using mostly vertical brush strokes to create a gentle gradation. Next I move down to the sea. For the distant water I use a colour mix mostly of ultramarine blue with a small touch of titanium white, but keeping it fairly dark and cool to suggest the depth. As the sea comes forward, I gradually add more cobalt blue and some cadmium yellow and a touch more titanium white, which shifts the hue toward a lighter greenish turquoise closer to the shore. And I decide to paint a wave in mid-crash as it crashes onto the sand, just as it's curling and breaking, as I feel this gives a sense of movement and drama to the sort of foreground section of the painting. And for the shadow of the wave I use a colour mix of ultramarine blue, permanent green and a small hint of alizarin crimson, and also a small touch of raw umber. And for that luminous green underbelly of the wave where it raises up and is catching some sunlight as it shines through the thin water, I use a colour mix of cadmium yellow and permanent green with a small touch of titanium white to create that slightly fluorescent glowing edge. To paint the headland in the distance, it's important that this feels far away, so I mix a colour mix that is very close in value to the sky but just a little bit darker, and I use cobalt blue, yellow ochre and a touch of alizarin crimson, and I'm keeping it low in contrast and muted in chroma, and that's the key to creating atmospheric perspective, is things lighten and cool and lose intensity and chroma as they recede further away into the distance. Now for the sand, which takes up much of the composition, and I start with a base mix of yellow ochre, raw umber, titanium white and a small touch of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue. And toward the shoreline, the sand darkens a bit as it's wet. So this section of the sand is slightly darker and also slightly more purplish in its hue. And further away to the right-hand side, where the sand is dry, it has a bit more of a pale yellow hue to it. As the water washes over the sand, it takes on a bluish purple tint from the reflected light from the sky above. So I use a colour mix of cobalt blue, alizarin crimson and some titanium white. And as the land curls round to the right, I lightly indicate a few buildings, some beach umbrellas and a palm tree along the beachfront. And these become sharper and a bit warmer in colour temperature as they come forward in the composition. And I'm trying to suggest distance through edges and colour temperature. For the footprints and the dips in the sand, I mix a slightly darker colour mix. I've added a bit of ultramarine blue, raw umber and alizarin crimson. And I've mixed this with a bit of that sand mix to create a sort of dark shadow tone. And I'm just carefully painting in some of these footprints, and they get gradually darker and sharper as they get closer to the foreground. And also I add a few figures walking along the beach towards the sea. And these are small touches that just give the painting a bit more of a sense of life and scale. In the foreground on the right hand side, I add a pink and white umbrella, which brings a nice splash of colour and a bit of visual interest to the foreground to help balance out the composition. And beneath it sits a woman watching the waves, and for her skin tones I start with a shadow mix of raw umber, cadmium red and yellow ochre, and also a small touch of ultramarine blue. And then once those darker tones are in, I add the lights using titanium white with a touch of yellow ochre. I'm keeping my brush strokes small but confident and directional. Further back I add a blue umbrella and a figure underneath it. And here I'm just adding some more figures further in the distance of the painting, and I'm just using simple brush strokes for their bodies, their shorts and also the shadows on the sand. And as I bring this painting to a finish, it also concludes my trip here in Portugal. And one thing I really love about plein air is it gives you a way to be completely present, brush in hand, recording a fleeting moment before it slips quietly into a memory. So I hope you've enjoyed that video of me painting here in the Algarve, and I hope you've enjoyed this series of paintings that I've done here in Portugal. It's now time to go back to England, so if you enjoyed that, remember, please do give me a thumbs up, give it a like, and if you haven't already, do please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that, and I'll see you for another video back in England.